Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. We welcome all devotees to the second day of our online Kartik Yatra. And yesterday we had a nectarian session about Kolkata, Prabhupada's birthplace and the pastimes around the city of Kolkata. We will be continuing in that vein today also. And now I would like to request His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj to kindly present today's katha, the second day of our online Kartik Yatra 2021. Hare Krishna.
Om Mokyantimidandasya Gyananjana Chalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Bandeham Sri Guru Sri Jutapatakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanda Radha Kanda Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindabaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gauda Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Pastyate Shatharine. I am very grateful for this opportunity to be with all of you. I am just remembering at this moment in the very early times of the Krishna consciousness movement in the West. Srila Prabhupada, after establishing 26 Second Avenue in the Lower East Side of New York City, and then establishing a storefront temple of Lord Jagannath Baladev Subhadra in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. Srila Prabhupada's health caused him great difficulty, and he decided to return to Vrindavan. And this was a very emotional experience for the devotees, because the senior most devotees in our movement at that time, they only first heard of Krishna 1 or 2 years, at the most 3 years before. It was extraordinary. Many of our devotees assembled today are from India. So from your earliest childhood, you heard about Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, and whether you followed or whether your family were practitioners is another thing, but it was familiar. But these early devotees of Srila Prabhupada in the West, they had heard nothing until they met Srila Prabhupada. And there was only a few dozen devotees, but they surrendered their lives to Srila Prabhupada. They took lifelong vows, and they left everything else in the world behind them just to follow Srila Prabhupada. And in those days, I believe there was just a little purple covered edition of Bhagavad Gita, which was, it was condensed by the publishers. And there was the 3 volumes of Bhagavatam that Srila Prabhupada brought. And that was practically the only literatures there was. And Srila Prabhupada was about to go to India, to Vrindavan, to hear from Sri Sri Radha Shyam Sundar, whether they desired for him to remain within this material world. For the devotees, it was a very striking reality that it may be the last time in their lives they ever meet Srila Prabhupada. He may not be with them any longer. This was sometime, I think, around 1967. And when Srila Prabhupada was about to board the airplane, we cannot even imagine the experience in all the devotees' hearts. They were totally depending on him. There was so much more they needed to learn about the teachings, the culture of Krishna consciousness. But they had 100% given their hearts. Srila Prabhupada assured everyone. He said, if you are chanting Hare Krishna and I am chanting Hare Krishna, then we are always together. Nothing can ever separate us. Not even time, not even death. Such a profound statement. And during that trying time, and in 1977, after Srila Prabhupada did leave us for the eternal abode of Sri Radharani and Krishna, those same words very much give us solace, hope, and the experience of Srila Prabhupada's presence. If you are chanting Hare Krishna and I am chanting Hare Krishna, we are always together. Nothing can separate us. Nahanyate hanyamane saride, because the soul is eternal. Najayate mariyate vakadachit. It is never born and will never die. And it is the soul that is the living force that is having exchanges between us. The body, which is a very fleeting, temporary material machine, is a medium, a very fleeting, temporary medium by which the soul can communicate with others within this world. But as the soul is eternal and the Paramatma, the super soul, is forever with us, when we are connected to Krishna, we can be connected with each other. on a material platform, we're experiencing a similar analogy with the internet. Some of you may be on YouTube, some may be on Zoom, but whatever it may be, the reason why we're all together, we could hear each other, we could see each other, we could feel each other's presence. It's really interesting because for some of you, from a literal physical perspective, all I'm seeing is a computer type of screen, and there's just light, all these little dots of light that form an image. And those images are moving, and some of those images I see are now even smiling and laughing, and some are mercifully glancing upon me. But actually, what are they? They're just little dots of light. But still, I feel your presence so personally and so much in truth, because those little dots of light represent you. And similarly, the body is like a virtual experience for the soul to interact with each other. But the reason we're able to do this today is we have all made the decision to, I'm not so sure with the modern words that are used, but we all tuned in to the same frequency. We all logged in to the same link or whatever, because at this moment, there's probably millions of people on Zoom and probably tens and millions or hundreds of people on YouTube. But we made the decision to make a connection to this link. And therefore, we're connected. And it's interesting because Srila Prabhupada, his definition, or let us say his translation of the word yoga, was link. You would say bhakti yoga is the process of linking with Krishna through bhakti. So because we have chosen the same internet link, we have the opportunity to physically be here. And because we have chosen the same yoga link of bhakti, we're actually always connected, even without the virtual screens. Even after we give up the temporary body, we can be connected by by being linked with Krishna. When we are linked with Krishna, we are naturally linked with each other. The Srimad Bhagavatam, that beautiful verse from the second canto, that if we pour water on the root of a tree, that water extends to all parts of the tree. When we offer loving devotional service to Radharani and Gopinath, then that loving service, the respect and honor is given, it naturally extends to all the demigods, all the millions of demigods, and to all living beings. Jivara Swarapoi Krishna Nityadas. Our nature is we're eternally servants of Krishna. Mamaivam so jivaloke jiva bhuta sanatana. the Jiva, the Tatastha Sakti, we are all infinitesimal expansions emanating from Krishna. Krishna is our origin, and Krishna is also our ultimate goal. We can never be separated from Krishna. But when our consciousness forgets our identity, and when our consciousness becomes bewildered by the illusory temptations and fears of this material world with all of its attractions and aversions, the world of dualities, then although we're with Krishna totally and completely, we're in a dream state where it appears that we're disconnected. So Srila Prabhupada, he spoke in his explanation of the Hare Krishna mantra that originally we are all Krishna conscious, but we have forgotten. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada, when he would be asked what his mission was, he would say, I have come to remind you what you have forgotten. So the 9 processes of devotional service, Sravana Kirtana Smarana Bandhana Pada Sevana Dasya Jyone Pujana Sakijana Atma Nivedana, especially Shravanam and Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, are ways of linking again with Krishna. The Mahamantra is our link that puts us in the same supreme spiritual reality with each other. And in this way, Srila Prabhupada was teaching that in our relationships with one another, when we are chanting Hare Krishna, we are together. So we are somehow or other all together. On this occasion, to appreciate, as we spoke yesterday, a place that was so much a part of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, Kolkata. Lord Nityananda Prabhu's base, Kardaha and Panihati, are really part of the area of Kolkata. That's where they open the marketplace of the holy names. And after Nityananda Prabhu departed from this world, his Shakti, his eternal consort, Janava Devi, who was referred to in many of our Vaishnava literatures as Ishwari Janava, her base was in Kardaha. Just a little ways down the stream of the river Ganga, upstream actually. And we read about Janava's pastimes, her journey to Ekachakra, her journey to Vrindavan, her travels around Bengal. She went to Ketarigram, to the place of Srila Narottam Das Thakur, along with her many beloved devotees for the first Gaur Purnima festival. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, most of his education was in Calcutta, and much of his preaching was in Calcutta. And it was in Calcutta that he sent his first book, which was meant for a Western audience, to the West on the year of Srila Prabhupada's birth, 1896. It was in Calcutta that Bhaktivinoda Thakur planned and executed so much of his vision. He was planting the seed, tilling the soil for Mahaprabhu's movement to spread throughout the world. And in his home, the Bhakti Bhavan in Calcutta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur departed from the world. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was born in Jagannath Puri. But when he was young, at 7 years old, he was living in Calcutta. He was being educated in Calcutta. His father gave him a deity of kurma to worship in Calcutta. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur such a life. He was living in Mayapur Dham. And it was at that time that in that time, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur disappeared in Calcutta. About a year later, his guru, Srila Gaur Das Babaji Maharaj, disappeared from the world. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he vowed to chant 1 billion names of Krishna. And he executed that vow. He accepted sannyas in Mayapur, and he established the Sri Chaitanya Math. At that time, he just had a few disciples. And Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj, Kunja Bihari Prabhu. And it was recommended that if you go to Kolkata, then you will have such a greater audience to preach to. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted worldwide preaching. He first established his press in Mayapur Dham. It was the will of his father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Nityananda Prabhu and Mahaprabhu. But at the beginning, he was establishing Mayapur as a place for the world to come. But, not many people were coming. So he was requested, let us go to Calcutta. Because at that time, Calcutta was the largest city in Bengal. In fact, it was the capital of India. Before Delhi, the capital of India was Calcutta during that time in the British rule. And it was the heart of education and also the heart of culture for all of India. And because India was under British rule at that time, it was obviously the most international part of all of India, Calcutta. But Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur really had no money. He had no means. But some of his very loving disciples, they said, let us try to find a place for you to live in Calcutta. And we will somehow or other arrange the expenses. I think Kunja Bihari Prabhu who later became His Holiness Bhakti Vilas Tirtha Maharaj. He was working for the postal service under the British regime. And so he had a very small income, but somehow they rented for 50 rupees a month. On November of 1918, a small house, the address number 1, Ultadungi Junction Road. It was a ground floor and a first floor, and then a little room on the rooftop. Now, at that time, 50 rupees a month, it wasn't a lot, but when you don't have anything is a lot. So it was a struggle, it was a risk, but they took that place. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, on the rooftop there was a room, 2 rooms actually. One became a temple later, and one became his residence. And there was about 4 or 5 devotees who lived downstairs. And in this way, in 1918, the preaching began in Calcutta. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur named that house Sri Bhakti Vinod Asana, the place of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, the place where his message and his mercy will spread throughout the world. The next year, in 1919, at the Ultadungi Junction house, Bhakti Vinod Asana, the Vishwa Vaishnav Raja Sabha was reestablished by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And I believe it was the next year, in 1920, that he installed deities of Lord Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Sri Radha Govinda Dev. In this very, very intimate, sacred place, almost all of the senior disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada first joined our movement. Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada established another press just close by. It's a small building. The most spacious place was the rooftop, a flat roof terrace. So when it was not the rainy season, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada would give his lectures on the rooftop. And his ever-growing group of disciples would sit at his lotus feet. Behind the building, a jackfruit tree was growing. And at the time, it appears that it was quite large, So he would sit in the shade of the jackfruit tree on the rooftop and preach from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And from there, gradually he was sending his disciples to various parts of Bengal, to various places in India, and they were opening branches of Gaudiya Math. Soon there was 108 branches of the, or 64, 64 branches of Gaudiya Math in India. He traveled on pilgrimages and established footprints of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the places where Lord Chaitanya visited. And he would give extensive lectures in those places. Yes, it was such an energetic heart of worldwide preaching. From there, in that little house in Ultadanga Junction Road, he sent devotees to England, to Germany, to spread Lord Chaitanya's mission all over the world. For us, the most sacred, endearing, and historical moment was in 1922. We have heard from the previous speakers today about Srila Prabhupada's life in Kolkata when he was attending the Scottish Churches College. Our Srila Prabhupada, who was then Abhay Charan, he had just been married. In 1921, he had his first child. But while he was in college, just prior to this, he was seeing so much of the injustices, the adharma, the exploitation that was taking place around him. And he affiliated and dedicated himself to the Swaraj, the movement within India for independence. And the leader was Mahatma Gandhi. To actually follow at that time, you had to make sacrifices and you had to take risks. Srila Prabhupada wore khadi, simple dhotis made out of hand-loomed cotton. Now, today we just think it's a style, or maybe it's environmentally friendly, whatever we want to interpret it as. But in those days, to wear khadi was a revolutionary political statement. It was like wearing a sign. British, get out of India. Quit India. All the governmental educational institutions were run by the British. Most all of the colleges were run by the British. The army, the police force, the entire government was run by the British. And here these people who really had no resources, by dressing this way, you're saying, Britain, get out of India. I personally, and the people around me, we reject you. And because Scottish Church College was, affiliated under the jurisdiction of the British regime, even though Srila Prabhupada spent years studying there, he rejected accepting his degree. That's a bold statement. Because, in most cases, if you go to college, if you don't have a degree, you don't really have certification to get a job. So in many ways, there was a risk to his entire economic future by rejecting the degree. Because he didn't want to be certified by those he rejected. In 1922, Srila Prabhupada was with one of his best friends. Just a few days ago, I was listening to a tape recording of Srila Prabhupada, and he was speaking, and he happened to refer to his friend, Narendra Mullock. And Srila Prabhupada said, he's still here. He's still living. But Narendra was a dear friend of Srila Prabhupada. And one day when they were walking down the street, not far from where Srila Prabhupada lived on Harrison Road, Narendra, he said to Abhay, I want you to meet a sadhu, a very great and learned sadhu. Because one of the sannyasis, disciples of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, went to some of the residences of the Mullock family, and there he met Narendra. And Narendra was very, very much impressed. And he was invited to come to meet the Guru, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. And there was a very wonderful inspiration that grew in his heart, so much that he wanted to bring our Srila Prabhupada and his friends to meet this sadhu. Srila Prabhupada expressed, I'm not interested. And Srila Prabhupada, he told the stories himself on many occasions. That he felt there were so many apparent sadhus and swamis and babajis who were hypocritical. Some were materialistic. Some were sectarian, just trying to get material gain or religious fame through being sadhus. And some is just a way of materially surviving. Taking intoxications. Srila Prabhupada saw in Gandhi and Gandhi's genuine followers, there wasn't a deep spirituality, but there was a deep sense of morality and a willingness to give your lives to a higher cause. And Srila Prabhupada really connected with that. And one thing that Srila Prabhupada always appreciated in Mahatma Gandhi is that he always carried a Bhagavad Gita with him. Srila Prabhupada didn't agree with many of his interpretations, speculations of the Gita, but still the fact that he carried the Gita with him was a great example for the nation, that a leader believes in the Gita. So Srila Prabhupada simply was not interested in sadhus. Narendra was actually pulling him and said, no, you will like this person. And Srila Prabhupada, he said that among all my friends, I was always the leader. And therefore, if I approved of this sadhu, then all my friends would also approve of him. So for Narendra, this was very important that Prabhupada come. Prabhupada resisted. It was the evening time in Kolkata. And just to please his friend, Srila Prabhupada said, all right, I will come. Let's just picture it. That building on Ultadangi Junction Road. It's a very small building. To explain this, the nature of the size of that building, some years later, when the Gaudiya Math moved out from it, it was just a couple poor families occupied the whole building. They weren't rich people. They were just like struggling people. A few families just occupied the rooms of the building. But it was the headquarters for the International Gaudiya Math. So Srila Prabhupada walked in the door and they were greeted by some devotees and brought up one flight of steps. And then another flight which led to the rooftop. There, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was sitting under the jackfruit tree, speaking from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Abhay Charan and Narendra, both coming from Vaishnava families, respectfully bowed down. As they were rising from the bowed position, before they even sat down properly, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur spoke to them. You are an intelligent young man. Take the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the whole world in the English language. Srila Prabhupada was very much amazed and startled. How wonderful. He's being given a lifetime mission before even the casualties of saying Hari Bol or pranams, before any introduction. Obviously, by his dress, Srila Prabhupada was a Gandhian. He was a person who was willing to dedicate his life and take all risks for the independence of India. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada could see that for certain. So that instruction also came as sort of a challenge. Srila Prabhupada very respectfully, he posed the argument that first we must gain independence from the British. As long as India is a subjugated country, who is going to listen to our message? First, let us fight for independence. Then these other goals can be followed. Actually, that idea was shared by practically all the Indian leaders within India, by scholars, by religious saints, by politicians. On that little rooftop on Ultadungi Junction Road, the Bhakti Vinod Asana, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was boldly going against the current of the entire nation. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, with great compassion and absolute certainty, he said to our Srila Prabhupada, governments are always changing. Who's in lead, who's not. Politics are always changing. Everything in this world is constantly changing. There is only one constant truth. And that is, we are all eternal spirit souls, part and parcel eternal servants of Krishna. Krishna consciousness. That is the great need. And that is the urgent need at this time and for all times. It cannot wait for any material adjustments. Srila Prabhupada spoke with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. From my research, they spoke for about 2 hours. And Srila Prabhupada, in his heart of hearts, he said, at that time, I accepted this is my eternal spiritual master. He said, I did not become his disciple officially, but in my heart, I surrender to him as my guru. It was getting late, and on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada's instruction, one of the devotees distributed prasad to everyone. And then they left the house. And Narendra Malik asked Prabhupada, what did you think? And our Srila Prabhupada said, he is wonderful. He is a very nice, saintly person. That is where the seed of ISKCON was planted within the heart of Srila Prabhupada. And every day he meditated on that instruction. Srila Prabhupada told us that he took that instruction so seriously. but he was married and had a child. He was wishing he could have been a sannyasi, so he could have just dedicated his entire soul to taking Lord Chaitanya's message to the West. But he had to be exemplary. He had to fulfill his responsibilities. One of his father's dearest friends was a Kartik Chandra Bose. And he was a doctor. And Srila Prabhupada said that he was actually the father of industry for independent India. He had a pharmaceutical business. And our Srila Prabhupada worked for him in Kolkata. And Mr. Bose made Srila Prabhupada his branch manager. And Srila Prabhupada was very young. He was still in his early 20s, and many of the employees were much older and senior, being in the company for many years. And they complained to Dr. Bose, "Why are you putting him over all of us?" And Dr. Bose said, "Because I completely trust him. I know him since he's a little child. His father's one of my best friends. I know his integrity. I completely trust him." And in one beautiful recording, Srila Prabhupada is talking about his working for Dr. Bose and how Srila Prabhupada was thinking, if I'm a grihasta, I should make money and offer it to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's Gaudiya Math to help them, because they really don't have funds. So he explained his convictions, and Dr. Bose said, "Well, why don't you become my agent for all of North India? And then you could just buy from me, and you could be the exclusive, and you can sell it and make profits. But to do this, you should go to Allahabad, because that is a very lucrative place." So Srila Prabhupada went to Allahabad and began his Prayag pharmacy. And it was there at Allahabad that he was initiated, first and second initiation by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. After some time, Prabhupada relocated to Bombay. And while he was there, he wrote and read that beautiful Vyas Puja offering to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. It was 1936. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in Jagannath Puri at the Chatak Parvat Gaudiya Math. He became very ill. It was on December 9th of 1936 that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur boarded a train to return to Kolkata. At that time, one of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's, Prabhupada's very dedicated disciple, Jagat Bandhu, he built a beautiful temple in the Bagh Bazaar. And they had a wonderful procession from Ulta Dungi Junction Road, that little old house, and they brought the deities to a beautiful marble palace temple. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada returned to Calcutta, and there his room is still almost exactly as it was in 1936. And he knew that he would soon leave his body. It's interesting because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was born in Puri and started his worldwide preaching in Calcutta. And now he was in Puri and he came back to Calcutta to leave this world. On December 27th, a very special historic day, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he gathered his senior-most disciples together and gave them instructions. Essentially, he was not only instructing his leaders, he was instructing all of his devotees, all of his followers for all time to come. And those instructions were carefully written down. Whenever Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur spoke, he always had several devotees writing down every word he would speak at his lectures. And he had several of them so that nothing would be missed. There were no tape recording machines in those days. But it's interesting. The literatures and the words that we receive when we didn't have, now we think, how will we live with all of this technology? But what was given to us before any of it ever existed are among the most profound and deep literatures the world has ever seen and the world will ever see. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in those last instructions, I'm just remembering a few things he said. That we should be united, that we should always be and remain united in the divine loving service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Acharyas. We should not seek to be heroes, either famous with accomplishments or even as great religious heroes. He said our only aspiration should be to be a speck of dust at the feet of Srila Rupa Goswami. He stressed that. This should be our exclusive aspiration, to be a speck of dust at the feet of Srila Rupa Goswami. He emphasized that we should never be discouraged. We must be enthusiastic to preach, to spread this message, And in this world of dualities, we should never be discouraged by results. He thanked all the devotees. He appreciated all the devotees for their lifetime of service. And then at 5:30 in the morning, on January 1st, 1937, Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajagacharya Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada disappeared from this world, entering into the eternal pastimes of Radha Govinda in Goloka. In Kolkata. When Srila Prabhupada received this news, the pangs of his love and separation can hardly even be imagined by anyone. In the physical absence of his guru, Srila Prabhupada took his words as his life and soul. Vyavashayatmaka bhutyarekeha kurunandana. At their first meeting in Kolkata, he was given the message to bring the message of Lord Chaitanya to the world in the English language. And their last communication, when Srila Prabhupada was in Mumbai, just a couple weeks before Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disappearance, a few weeks, Srila Prabhupada had written to Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and asked him how he could best serve. And in the letter that returned, which was the last correspondence they had, he gave the same instruction. Take the message of Lord Chaitanya to the whole world in the English language. And how special the way Krishna orchestrated everything. We are all very familiar. Srila Prabhupada went to start a worldwide movement in Jhansi. He spent, after he became a Vanaprastha and retired from his Grihastha ashram, he spent about a year developing it, and then it was all just taken away. And he was already an elderly man. But he was always seeing an opportunity. He went to Vrindavan and was given a little room at the Bamsi Gopal temple, just near the Yamuna River. And he was, for many years, he was printing the Back to Godhead magazine and writing articles for it. He continued that in Vrindavan, and then he was given residence at the Radha Damodar temple. And after he completed the first canto, he had no money. He had to get it printed on consignment. He had to beg for donations and loans just to get that book printed. And here he was in Mumbai begging for passage to the West. This is how serious he was about fulfilling the order of his spiritual master. We should meditate on this mood of surrender. Every obstacle was there. We know that when he was on his passage to America, he had 2 heart attacks. So obviously before he left, he wasn't in good health. He was 69 years old, not in good health. He had no money. He knew no one. And yet he was begging Sumati Maharaj, give me passage on a cargo ship. How many people will beg? Not only did he beg, but she refused. She was an international traveler. He never left India in his life. She was experienced. She said, Swamiji, no, I will not give you a ticket. You will die. At your age, to go on a cargo ship all that way, and when you go to America, nobody will listen to you, and it's very cold, and you don't know anyone. You will die. I cannot do it. Such a warning from such an experienced person. But Srila Prabhupada insisted. He was humble, he was respectful. When all else failed, he just sat on the steps of her office. And her secretary, a gentleman came out and said, Swamiji, could I get you something to eat? And Prabhupada said, no, I'm fasting until I get that ticket. I'm sitting on these steps and I'm not going anywhere. Sumati Maharaj was really in a predicament because she didn't want to be responsible. She loved Prabhupada. She honored him as one of the great, as the greatest saint in the world. She didn't want to be responsible for his death, but at the same time, he said, I will not move until I receive the ticket. So she gave him passage on the MV Jaladuta. And how wonderful, because the ship was leaving from Calcutta. Srila Prabhupada, he returned to Vrindavan, and then he took a train, and because he had no sponsors and he had no income, he took the mail train, 3rd class mail train, which is very slow. It takes several days to get from Delhi to Calcutta. And while there, he went to Mayapur Dham to pray at the samadhi of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, for blessings. And he went to Shantipur, where he prayed for the blessings of Advaitacharya. And he went to the Yoga Pita in Mayapur and prayed for the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And then he returned to Calcutta. And his son, Vrindavan Chandra Day, who just a couple years ago departed from this world. He was a young man at the time. And Srila Prabhupada was staying at a free dharamshala, which is just like a place for sadhus to stay. It was just he had a little room in Calcutta that was given free to people. And he was staying there. And Srila Prabhupada contacted his elder son, Mathura Mohan, to help him to go to the ship, to the docks. But Mathura Mohan was unable to do it. So Srila Prabhupada contacted Vrindavan Chandra Dey, his youngest son, and said, please come and pick me up and take me to the ship. And Vrindavan Chandra Dey, I remember he told me the story. He was crying as he told the story. Somehow or other, he hired a taxi because Prabhupada didn't have the funds to do it. Vrindavan Chandra hired a taxi and went to this little guest dharamshala. And all Prabhupada had was one little bag and an umbrella. He didn't have any luggage or anything. He didn't have anything. And he brought him to the King George dockyards. And they're together. Vrindavan Chandra Dey and Srila Prabhupada boarded the MV Jaladuta. It was actually a very old cargo ship. In fact, it was so old that a couple of years later, I believe it was retired and a new MV Jaladuta was made. And that was just kind of scrapped. And Vrindavan Chandra Dey and Prabhupada were just sitting together on the boat on the river Ganges. The boat was in the Ganga in Kolkata. And they were speaking. And common to situations in India, the boat was very late in departing. And when the whistle started blowing, Vrindavan Chandra just looked at his father. They embraced, and he was thinking, I will never see my father again. What a great man. He left the boat and stood on the shore and just watched the ship depart, going in that harbor of Mother Ganga into the ocean. Yes, in honoring all these most dear spiritual events that took place in Calcutta, we have an opportunity to honor our beloved Srila Prabhupada and the great acharyas who infused him with the limitless mercy and compassion that he entrusted to all of us. And today, Srila Prabhupada's birthplace is now in the care of Srila Prabhupada's devotees for the first time in history. And today, for the first time in history, Ultadunga Junction Road, the entire building, the entire house where Srila Prabhupada met his guru, and where such incredible pastimes of compassion took place, is in the care of Srila Prabhupada's devotees. And today, the temple at Albert Road both in its renovation and physical beauty, as well as the spirit and enlivenment of empowered preaching, is greater than it's ever been before. And many other such projects. But for any project in Krishna consciousness on the path of true bhakti, empowerment comes through blessings. So we are especially excited that our Kartik Yatra this year is Kolkata, simply because I believe the devotees in Kolkata are on a threshold of doing something historically and wonderfully pleasing to Srila Prabhupada. And we wanted to draw attention so that devotees from all over India and all over the world will offer prayers and blessings. And with these words, I thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj, for your enlightening class. Maharaj, you'd like to read Kirtan now, Maharaj?
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine.
Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatharine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatharine.
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Brinda.
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Brinda.
Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Ram Ram, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada.
Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada.
Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Haribo.
Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Gaura Haribo. Gaur Premanande, Radhanath Swami Maharaj ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Kaliyuga Pavana Harinam Sankirtan ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Kolkata Yatra ki.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. So now I'll request the technical team to go off.